The Institute for Management Development recently released its Future Readiness Indicator Report, which ranks companies on how future ready they are. Joining us now is IMD's Lego Professor of Management and Innovation, Howard Yu. He joins us from Boston. Professor Yu, what are the themes that tie these companies together in terms of whether or not they are ready for the pandemic economy, or the post-pandemic economy, I should say?
Yeah, so we have quite a specific definition when it comes down to future readiness. What we're trying to measure here is which company across their sectors are able to scale and build up those capabilities relevant for future competition. So you think for a moment like automotive. These days, of course, every automakers can build electric vehicles. But what distinguishes those who are future ready are their mastery in software capabilities, in chipset manufacturing. And those who not just talk about it, but able to scale, we classify them as future ready. So we across sectors, we identify basic themes across different industry, which are the ones who are more future ready than others.
Howard, let's talk about that automotive segment that you just spoke about. The idea that a lot of these EV makers, these regular automobile makers essentially, are turning to EV so that they don't really get out or don't really age out of the business, essentially. Talk to us a little bit about why they're succeeding. Throw some names if you can.
Yeah, so if you think for a moment, of course, these days, electrifying the drivetrain is actually quite easy. If you think about Ford and GM and all the way to Nissan, they're all doing the same thing. But what gets exposed these days with semiconductor shortages is the ability to not just stockpile like Toyota early in advance, although that gives you an advantage, but the ability to really update your interface and software all the way to the firmware level over the air. And what you're seeing is Tesla is really shining during this period because their factory is able to continue to operate. They're able to source any general purpose chipset in order to keep their factory going, versus other companies such as VW and Honda, etc. Those who are lower in the pack, they really have to pause the production right now. So what it demonstrates is being future ready is a source of resilience. It actually helps you to pivot when the uncertainty arrives. And as I'm seeing in 2022, we were simply facing a lot more uncertainty. So being future ready is ever more important these days.
Well, let's continue down through some other industries here, because looking at your data, I'm taking a look at some of the fashion and apparel companies. You have Lululemon basically ranked right at the top, and right on the heels there are Nike and Hermes. What is it about these companies here that I guess makes them future ready, in your words?
Yeah, retail is interesting, right? Because for a long time, all these CEO and top executive knows the importance of e-commerce and direct-to-consumer relationship. But what you're seeing is those who are staying on the top of the ranking are the ones who not just talking about this e-commerce and omni-channel strategy, but they in fact have scaled those capability around direct-to-consumer relationship. So if you take a Lululemon or Nike, right? The ability for you to customize your sneakers and ship it over in days and still making a lot of profit for Nike, that illustrates the importance of not just digitizing in the upfront, but digitizing in the back end over the supply chain as well. Remember, 15 years ago, before anybody thinking about, iPhone app and things like that, before that is even possible, Nike already manufactured this chipset or sensor for you to put at the back of your shoes and beams data for you to connect with your iPod at the time. That is the first generation of direct-to-consumer relationship, building an online community. Those capability takes time. Those who invest ahead of the others, during the pandemic, we see them able to pivot big time to e-commerce, so that some retailer and consumer brand are lining up for bankruptcy. Nike and Lululemon just took off the roof.
Hey, Professor Yu, what about when it comes to the technology space? Even looking at, the returns this year for the S&P 500 helped get powered higher by those big tech companies, those mega cap tech companies. On your list are companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. Oftentimes we hear that large companies have a hard time pivoting and changing, and that can, be a dilemma for adapting to the future. I mean, we're not having this conversation about IBM, for example.
Yeah.
So how do these largest tech companies stay nimble?
Absolutely, Tim. I mean, in the tech sector, being fast and able to branch out to new product and services is absolutely key. Those who get stuck with their single product would eventually languish, and we've seen all these horrific stories in the past, like Nokia and so on. And so what we observe here in the tech sector is those who are the ones who are having bias for action. They're able to branch out to new business model. They're much more resilient during the pandemic, and they are more future ready. So companies such as Amazon is a prime example of how they branch out to alternative business model. But if you even looking at chipset manufacturer, right? You have NVIDIA and AMD and ranking pretty highly in the ranking, and they are the one who are able to start it off from the core business, whether it's graphic card or video card. They're able to branch out to AI and all these new area and top the list these days. Versus compare and contrast like someone like Intel, because of the historic situation, because all the factory they inherited, they are unable to branch out to new area. As a result, they're missing a lot of opportunity, and that causes a lot of concern these days.
Our big thank you to Howard Yu, the Lego Professor of Management and Innovation at the IMD Business School, joining us from Boston. Happy New Year, Professor Yu. Thanks for joining us.